Testing, testing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are live.
Great, thank you. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Special Electoral Area Service Committee meeting of March the 10th, 2022. As always, I'd like to acknowledge our meeting today on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples. And so this is workshop number 4 in our series on the MOCP. And nice to see you all again. So I'll turn it to Ms. Harrison for the first item on the agenda, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda of the Special Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of March 2nd. Or sorry, March 10th.
Okay, it's been moved. We have second. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item, please, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item is public input, and we have no applications.
Okay, thank you. And that would then bring us to reports.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item is R1, reports R1. And this is a revised report and Schedule A, Appendix I for performance metrics. And the policy goal areas 5, 6, 7, and 8 from the Planning and Strategic Initiatives Division regarding Schedule 8 to CBRD Bylaw 4373, Official Community Plan for Electoral Areas. And we have a continuation of the presentation by Modist and Holland Planning.
Okay, thank you. I see Ian with your hand up.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I don't want to start us off by going backwards, but I was hoping I might be able to get a clarification on something that was highlighted in attachment C just before we go forward. When I read things that don't make sense to me, I don't want to let it sit. So, and we may need to bring our friend Mr. Dennison in on this one. It's in regards to the it's the part that says added. Encourage infrastructure services such as water and sewer systems to be installed prior to new development. And, you know, on the surface, that sounds about right, but I can't imagine any development proceeding, unless it was like a really big one, without it having services developed concurrently with the development. The costs of infrastructure are so high that if we wanted to just stop all growth, then that's the policy that you have, because someone will have to spend millions of dollars before they can subdivide and sell a property. So I'm just wondering if there might be some, you know, closer language and more operationally functional language that could be changed too. I get the intent is that we don't want people building outside of serviced areas, but I can't imagine how any developer reading this document we'd get past go if we had that language in there. So I turn to staff or Mr. Holland or anyone else that might be able to address that.
Who would like to take that one? Coralie.
Sure, through the chair. So thank you to Director Morrison. We can amend that language to say when appropriate.
Okay, that helps. Okay. Director Atkin.
Yeah, maybe we could clarify that
language, because I actually, from what I heard from Director Morrison, disagree. I would strongly, for at least for Shawnigan Lake, I don't know how his community feels, but we do not want any further development without the services.
Okay, that's noted then. I also saw Director Wilson hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Two things. First of all, I'm going to be turning my video off again in a minute so I can have my lunch without people watching me. And one of the things that I was speaking to with Coralie earlier on today, Coralie, when would be a good time to bring that forward in this particular meeting, please, that subject? Just for clarification, please.
I believe through the chair to Director Wilson, I believe that the policy circle economy is being discussed today, Patrick. So it would be appropriate in conjunction with that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Brian Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in referring to Shawnigan Lake, it's likely, unless we somehow mysteriously get a giant grant of some sort, it's a report coming on this at the next EAS next week, where we would be working with a development in order to initiate sewer service. So it's kind of coming together at once, right? So the development is the means by which, if we don't have anything else, any other means of money, because we can't generate money very easily. We don't have a service there or any function. So often we have partnerships with private developments in which with the development comes the servicing, and once it exists, then you can look to grow it, others can connect, that kind of thing. But to go from zero to a service, unless we've got very special circumstances, is very difficult to do otherwise. So, it's we do need to have those services, but they're likely to have to come with a development, at least initially, in order to establish it.
Okay, thank you. Good. Well, I think we've handled that. So we'll turn, maybe Coralie, would you like to just introduce our guests and tell us where we're at?
Sure. So good afternoon, everyone. And this afternoon, we are going to be presenting the remaining 4 policy areas. And that will be led by Patrick Ostrick from Modus and Mark Holland from Holland Plan. And then we also have online as a resource, Aaron Licker. Aaron, if you could, if you're listening, there he is, who is from Licker Spatial, and he does all of our GIS specialist work for us. Thank you. So I'll let Patrick lead us through the discussion. Thank you.
Very good, and thank you. Just a note, special thank you to Aaron for the information. I know you sent some to me, Area A, and to Lynn for Area G, so very helpful. Okay.
Thank you so much, Coralie and the chair and all the directors today. It's again a pleasure to be here in front of you to present the next 4 chapters of policy as part of the Modernized Official Community Plan. So I'm just going to share my screen here so we can get right back into the presentation where essentially we started off. So I'm just going to share this here. Can everybody see that? Great.
Yeah.
So on March 2nd, we spoke to mitigating and adapting to the climate crisis, managing infrastructure responsibly, making distinct and complete communities, and expanding mobility options. And so today, March 10th, we find ourselves with the last 4 policy chapters. That includes protect and restore natural assets, strengthen local food and agricultural systems, enhance regional prosperity, and improve governance and implementation. So I'm just going to fast forward now to that protect and restore natural assets slide. Right. So again, just in terms of the purpose of today's meeting, we're seeking feedback, we're seeking input on these policies and on these policy chapters prior to going out into the community for community circles, where we'll be getting broader feedback from residents, from stakeholders, and then again, having another opportunity to refine and to adapt the Modernized Official Community Plan based on the feedback that we've received. So this isn't the final opportunity to provide comments and to provide input into this process and to adapt and change the modernized official community plan. We're always open to suggestions, and that will continue into the future and through this next phase of engagement process, of course. So as part of the fifth policy chapter of protecting and restoring natural assets, one thing that you might have noticed since the last time we met, not in March, but in October, is the title of this chapter has changed. And so it used to be protect and enhance natural assets, and now we're speaking to something a little bit deeper, restoration. And that was a suggestion from, to really strengthen the language here so that we're not just enhancing, but we're actually taking certain natural environments that have suffered perhaps impacts from whether it's climate change or human impacts, and when we're looking to actually restore them. Some of the challenges that we're facing in relation to this topic is human footprint in natural areas, of course, habitat loss, fragmentation, and degradation, increase in invasive species, as well as, of course, the climate crisis. So the key objectives within this policy chapter is to include the development of a natural asset framework as a tool to identify, prioritize, and protect and enhance sensitive ecosystems while also ensuring the continued health of watersheds and airsheds. So the key topics that we're broaching in this chapter are, direction on a natural asset framework, and then policies related to terrestrial ecosystems, and then aquatic ecosystems. So just a set of sample policies and from within this chapter, the main one and a quite strong departure from we do asset management today in many local governments, but it's the establishment of a natural asset management framework. And that would include the identification and assessment of those natural assets, using watershed management plans as guiding documents that inventory priority natural assets, evaluating the condition of those assets, planning, priorities defined by risk identification, scenario exploration, implementation strategies, and then decision-making processes based on the financial figures, the numbers of those natural assets. And so that's going to be that's a major policy item. It would really change the way that you conduct asset management in the region. It would essentially take into account all the services that the natural environment provides to our communities and to our residents in terms of all sorts of things, whether it's drainage services, whether it's stormwater management, water filtration, all sorts of great services that obviously the natural environment provides to our communities. Other policies related to terrestrial ecosystems, the percentage of lands that are dedicated and managed protected natural areas, and consideration of committing to the UN biodiversity goals of 30% of all land and water to be protected by 2030, 50% by 2050. Of course, those are ambitious goals, but it's something that that we think is certainly possible. There's seeking to protect species at risk and monitoring the scale and change of species listed as being at risk in the region. And of course, those little orange stars allow us to monitor these particular policies and as metrics that Mark will be presenting shortly, and then another policy related to increasing the canopy cover. In terms of aquatic ecosystems, we're looking at discouraging development immediately adjacent to a mudflat, marsh, or delta areas. These are very important in terms of the wildlife habitat that they provide and the ecological services as well. And then obviously developing living by water foreshore management education materials to help property owners who live next to the water, live next to aquatic ecosystems, so that they can manage their properties in a way that that doesn't impact negatively those ecosystems. And so this is just a quick sample of some of the policies within this policy chapter. I'll pass it on to Mark to speak to some of these metrics.
Thank you, Patrick. Good afternoon, everyone.
Sorry, Mark, I just saw Director Wilson's hand up. Go ahead, Director Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Blaise.
I have my hand up too.
Oh, I can't see you, Klaus. Okay, you're next.
Patrick, would you mind going back to the previous slide? There we go. NA26, discourage development immediately adjacent to a mudflat, marsh or delta areas. Here's the problem right here. None of these places, or a lot of these places, are not defined as such. How do you go about that? Do you say to a potential developer, what about places which are not that well defined? Let's say a different type of proposed development. How do you go about that?
So through the chair to Director Wilson, I would certainly look to environmental staff at the CVRD to make those determinations. I mean, the language here is discouraged, so it's not a complete no. It's not a this cannot happen. It really will. It will require a bit of discretion from staff's determination. And I think that's also something that's relatively necessary in certain development applications, depending on the location, depending on the sensitivity of that particular marsh or mudflat.
Good. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And Klaus, I'll turn to you. For general information, if you flag me in the chat if your hand is up and we don't have, if I can't see you. Thank you. Klaus.
Lands dedicated and managed as protected natural areas. Now, that doesn't include managed forest lands, does it?
That's a very good question. So through the chair to Director Kuhn, we could certainly look at whether or not that would be considered, but I don't believe that private managed forest lands would be considered as part of this, given they would not be really, they'd be potentially being cut down, right? So you would have that that scenario where these aren't necessarily being protected for their habitat quality and their habitat considerations.
So if I could just follow up on that, if I look at the percentages there, the UN diversity goals of 30% of all land and water and 50%. Now, would that include the land of forest land? Because if it doesn't, you'd have to segregate that out, and then the area that you're trying to protect would be substantially smaller than you thought. So,
yeah, absolutely. So we would have to be looking at lands that aren't within the PMFLs.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So in the chat, I see I have Lynn and then Ben. Lynn, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Through to possibly Patrick. Excuse me. Can you let Ben go first? I'll finish with my cough.
Okay. Ben, if you're ready.
Oh, you caught me off there. A couple of things, and it's maybe my newness to this, Patrick, but I'm just understanding there's a lack of information or I think on foreshore. And I'm not speaking to both lakes and marine. I see creeks and rivers are identified, for example, in that last policy, but I'm not sure why those aren't included more often.
Yeah. Through the chair to Director Martman, there has been, I believe, in the work plan for future work to be developed is a marine OCP, a marine official community plan, at which point that process would develop a greater suite of policies related to the foreshore and marine areas. So we've we've avoided sort of overstepping that process through this OCP update.
And a follow-up, if I may?
Yeah, go ahead.
And the other question was, nothing below subsoils or anything below soils is not included, and just trying to understand why.
So are we talking about aquifers and soil health as well?
Oh, I'm talking about aquifer, minerals, anything that exists below the soil layer.
No, that's a good point. I believe there might be policies. I have to double check real quick, but I believe there are some aquifer policies in there about protecting groundwater. I haven't highlighted them specifically in these sample policies, but I do believe they're there. I just have to flip back into my policy document to see the greater suite of them.
And mineral deposits and all those types of things that are down below the surface of the earth.
Yeah, I don't think we've included policies in relation to mineral deposits.
Okay,
that's not included, no.
Thank you. Okay, just before I go to back to Lynn and then Ian. So Patrick, we're going to see a marine OCP at some point. I'm not aware of that one.
So I'll maybe allow Corley to provide a bit more information on that.
Okay, thank you.
Through the chair, to the chair, we are planning on whether it's a marine OCP or a marine subplan, but that is something on the work plan in 2023.
Okay, good, thank you. So Lynn, back to you.
Okay, everybody's kind of stole my thunder, but I will. I also had the marine OCP policy. It would be disappointing to see it held off till 2023, as there is in our electoral areas a large portion of the marine area, and I do have concerns waiting for that to be 2023. We'll see additional damage as we continue along and development, and that's definitely an area that we should be protecting as quickly as possible. And I also had the same concerns about the managed forest in Area G, Saltaire. 97% of our area is that managed forest, so it makes it a little more complicated. And in our managed forests, we have our watersheds that provide water to, I think, partly Chemainus, to Ladysmith, even to the regional district of Nanaimo. So I think that that's something that I'm concerned about. And the other one, where is it? I don't remember. Oh, I wasn't sure. Can also be our eagle nests, that type of thing, the owls, their nesting grounds and that. So I'm not sure if they fit someplace and I've misreading it in here. Can you just advise me on that? Thank you.
Yeah, through the director to, or through the chair to Director Smith. As for the natural asset framework, this is really in relation to certain types of natural assets that we can calculate through standards that have been established, and a value, an economic value to that natural asset, how in terms of the types of services that it could provide our communities, that it does provide our communities. And so these are quantifiable in their value, and I don't believe that eagles or eagles' nests would be incorporated within that type of framework. We're talking mostly about sort of larger ecological habitat features that filter water, that provide shading perhaps in terms of a tree canopy, that provide certain types of services that may be able to be quantified in terms of their assets, so that it can be incorporated into our asset management, so that asset management doesn't only incorporate things like roads, or I guess in the regional district it wouldn't be roads, but the other types of harder infrastructure within the region. It would incorporate natural features as well. So I think I don't know if that answers the question, but in terms of, we're really looking at larger ecological systems here, as opposed to individual kind of nests or wildlife.
Okay.
Just a follow up, and maybe Coralie's going to speak to this. It's just, you know, we do have the eagle's nest. There needs to be a distance between, you know, where there's development and that's, will it be someplace in here in the OCP so that we have those distances that are the same? And if that it relates back to development. So I think Coralie has something to say there. Thank you.
Coralie.
Through the chair to Director Smith, we do have a draft bylaw 4342 to protect raptors' nests that will be advanced. That's been drafted for this purpose specifically on eagles' nests.
Great. Okay.
And if I may add as well, I mean, it does not also preclude all of the environmental development permit areas and guidelines that are associated with those areas. So those types of development permit areas would also be looking to protect those natural features.
I have Ian, and then Lori, then Allison. So Ian, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Patrick, because I was actually kind of wondering what this section actually meant, because to me, I was reading natural asset management as opposed to framework. So thank you for the clarification. And so I look at this and contemplate what has been done in Gibson's, who are kind of the leaders in local government on the whole natural assets and valuations and some of the systems. Wondering, because this is a far bigger undertaking than what it sort of appears to look like in here. It's when we move into that realm of doing a natural asset management initiative, it's going to be a really big deal, very expensive, and all the issues that have been brought up so far are going to come into play. So shouldn't we be drawing more attention to this as a significant regional initiative that will need to be addressed by future boards, as opposed to, you know, a section as a sample policy in this document? It needs more oomph, it needs more gravitas in the document than it appears as I see it.
Patrick?
Yeah, through the director to or through the chair to Director Morrison, I certainly take that comment. I understand that, yeah, it is the first policy in the chapter, so we tried to emphasize it and accentuate it that way. There's a little bit of language in the introduction to the policy chapter about it, but we can certainly look to make it a bit more highlighted and underlined in the document so that it really pops, I suppose.
Okay, thank you.
Just a quick follow-up. I
Yes,
think this is going to be something that will be mandated on local governments at some point, maybe not in the next 5 years, but absolutely will be. And I think that if we can get ahead of the curve and do some of the work that's required around this and incorporate it into our systems, the sooner the better. Maybe not right now, but the sooner the better. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So we'll go now to Lori.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to speak to also the bylaw 4342 on raptors and the terrestrial ecosystems. I wonder if there's any chance, and I don't know how it could happen, Salt Spring, I believe it's Salt Spring, that if you happen to have that on your property, that is of a benefit and there is a tax deduction. Because what I've noticed in my area, that if you had an eagle's nest or if you had a heron rookery, you'd quickly want to get that off your property so that you could utilize your property. So is there a way that people who have these properties, actually it's a benefit instead of a disadvantage? If there's a way we could show that. And also, I know a lot of people are talking about forestry, but there's Ministry of Transportation, the management of ecosystems, they share with us a lot of properties and a lot of them, I was shocked, are completely dilapidated after this last storm because they haven't been looked after. So I don't know where that would fit. Thank
you. Patrick, or
through the director noted, I'll look into it.
okay, thank you, Corley. Anything further, Laurie? It's okay. All right. So next, Allison.
I agree with Ian on the issue of natural assets, but I also it is actually the sort of the foundation for all of the management, done in conjunction with the what do you call it, the regional conservation strategy or whatever it was called, because that really is about understanding the condition of your sensitive ecosystems, which are really important part of your asset framework. So it is a huge project, and I think it needs to be highlighted. And I think when we provided our comments to the North Cowichan on their draft OCP, I think that was the point I was trying to make, that this is not something that we can do. We need to do this regionally. We need to look at it regionally. And it is a big initiative, but it lays the foundation for protecting for protecting all the environmental values. So we really need to get onto it. And while it is important to do it well, it is also possible to do sort of iterative, start with a rough cut and then gradually over time improve the data and the quality of the work, because a little bit of sort of a rough guess at some of this stuff is better than nothing at this point. And having said that, so I would like to see it emphasized a bit more too. And then having said that, I've got two other smaller policy things that I'd like to raise, so I can do that now or later.
Okay, go ahead now if you like.
So one thing that I'd like to see in here is we talk a little bit about tree retention policies and advocating to have that kind of a possibility, and supporting private landowners to retain trees. I think we should also say in particular Western red cedar, because that's an incredibly important species for Cowichan tribes and other First Nations, and it is a species that is really at risk at this point with climate change, with the changing climate in our area. So that's one thing. And then the other issue is we had an interesting situation up on Mountain Road in, actually it's in Area B, but it's right close to Cowichan Station, where some landowners wanted to covenant their private managed forest land. So when they sold the property, it wouldn't be harvested. And it's in the Coxsila watershed. And that kind of thing is really important at this point for the Coxsila, for the health of the Coxsila water and watershed. So it was a long and cumbersome process. It really needs to be streamlined because there are way too many jurisdictions that they had to kind of deal with. And in the end, after 3 years of working away at it, they abandoned their project, and it was bought by developers who are proceeding to log, and I'm even worried it may become a quarry up there now. So I just think we need to figure out a better way of streamlining the process and partnering with land trusts to encourage conservation covenants.
Okay. Good. Well, thank you. Lots of good comments. So seeing no further questions on this section, we'll turn back now to Mark for the metrics, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a really interesting area to do metrics in, and I think a number of challenges were faced. But before I say that, I just want to extend a grateful comment to Kate Miller and her team under Brian Dennison in the CVRD. We took a lot of direction from Kate. She's a scientist and a planner and has brought a lot of discipline and science to this, and has spearheaded numerous state of environment reports over the past decade and more to get data for us. So we had quite a range of information to draw from. Our challenge was that a lot of the state of environment work that is focused on the CVRD comes at an occasional process when a grant is available for some particular topic. And so there is a smattering of quite a bit of data over the last 10, 15, 20 years, but not in a repeatable way that would give you a sense of consistent, timely updates over the every cycle of OCP reporting that in ways that are bounded by the CVRD boundaries. So we're not overlapping with lots of other boundaries. And so what we've ended up with is essentially 3 areas here to keep track of a number of components. So the percentage of areas essentially that are environmentally sensitive. So in Appendix A, we talk about those. So we were able to break that down based on data that the province allows us to have access to through the ESA studies and mapping. So we've got a number of different types of sensitive areas and the percentages of them in terms of the sensitive area as well as the total areas. So this is a snapshot for your OCP at this moment, and this can be tracked with every OCP update. You can then begin to get a continuous map of each of these as to whether they're growing or decreasing and how they're changing. The next one was species at risk, and likewise, again, this is a provincial source of information that is tracked regularly, that is relevant to your boundaries, that looks at both flora and fauna and tracks those. So again, over time, you'll be able to use this as a lag indicator to show response to the decisions you're making around environmental protection and development, to see whether we can begin to reduce some of these that are at risk by enhancing habitat, or whether we're struggling with finding more on these lists as we work to accommodate growth, albeit in the most sensitive way possible. The final piece is one that we're noting that is sort of a linked to climate change, but also very closely to health. So again, we can get these from provincial air quality data. Now, this is right now the province continually tracks consistent 2.5 millimeter particulate in both 24-hour and 1-year averages through an equation that they micrograms per cubic meter of air. So you can see in the summer sometimes, or some years are worse than others. So these are the 2 consistent ones. Now you have purple air monitors that are located throughout different areas of the region as well. These are not monitored in the same consistent way, and they can come and go. And so in this dashboard shouldn't be seen as the only thing we're tracking. And there are regular air quality roundtable meetings where many different levels of government and agencies meet regularly to consistently to track trends over time, decade after decade for you, where this one's that come from consistent provincial reporting. So those are the 3 that we've selected for your ongoing dashboard for the OCP that are relevant to your area. We can get accurate data, and we can get it, we believe, every time you want to do an OCP update or an interim dashboard update. Thank you.
Am I?
Sorry, Allison, and then Ian, and then.
Hi, thanks. Did you think about anything around invasive species?
Through the chair, thank you for the question. It's a good question, obviously a very relevant one. Part of our challenge was, and I'd be very keen to take some direction from you, Director, if you have some suggestions around where we could get some, there's obviously a fair amount of information about it and it's of high concern, trying to find an indicator or a metric that we could track steadily within the CVRD that would be mapped the same, every 5 years for an update. We weren't able to find one in the work that we did. If you have some suggestions for others, I think that would definitely be a very relevant metric, because it's one that speaks to clearing, it's one that speaks to human impact of many different types, Obviously, Scottish broom being one of the biggest ones, but there's a good number of them that are coming in there. So if you do have some suggestions, I'd be very pleased to investigate those and see if we could include them.
Okay, can I have a follow-up?
Go ahead.
So I also think percentage of area and hectares classified as environmentally sensitive, we need to incorporate into that the idea of condition. Some of these, I mean, like I get that you can track whether you're losing old forests, but like the riparian, you don't expect to lose the riparian, but the condition of the riparian could be definitely changed. So when we do our asset management framework, that's one of the important pieces of information that we would be able to incorporate. Thanks.
Through the chair, again, excellent comment. This was one of the ones that I think certainly those of us who have a history in sort of environmental design really struggled with in trying to find metrics that we could get reliable data without having to do entire new studies for the region or major areas of the region each time, which are very expensive and time consuming, to understand these issues of not only condition, but also of new habitat that's being created. This is one that I certainly struggle with a lot because we can use new development to actually create new habitat for quite a number of species that are quite comfortable sharing space with us as humans. Some of them are not so much, certainly many are for food at least 10 months of the year, maybe not for some nesting or breeding seasons, but trying to find some ability to track that regularly, because it would be a lovely and very policy responsive metric. We simply were unable to find any source of data for you that would be reliable and not require you to have to spend tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars doing update studies every 5 to 10 years across very large areas to try and understand this. So I hope you can hear the anguish in my voice as I struggle. We struggle to find metrics that would meet our criteria within actually the complexity and the excitement of this area. So again, if you have some suggestions for, even if we wanted to pick a few extra sensitive areas that you're focusing on, if there was a way we could track that, very, very keen to include some additional metrics here.
Okay, thank you. So I now have Ian and then Laurie and then Lynn. Ian.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, through to staff. It's so obvious, or maybe it doesn't apply, why we wouldn't track precipitation in this section. And it's so inextricably linked to so much of what we're talking about. There's climate change, we're going to have desertification in our region. We're like, even just, a lot of people don't know there's 4 meters difference in rainfall between Heather Mountain and Cowichan Bay. And so could that be added? I think there's reliable data points and sources for that. And I think tracking that will assist if we do see any significant changes that may actually affect policy and drive what will happen within the region as far as growth goes. So thoughts on whether or not that could be an added metric in here?
Through the chair, thank you, Director Morrison. Excellent point. I think at the current dashboard here is getting a bit of a rethink on those exact issues. I think when we first got into this, we had these overlapping criteria, and one of the ones that was of importance to us partly was constrained by the CVRD's boundaries as much as possible, but also was something that was really trying to be a little bit policy related, as in, would it change based on you implementing policy? And obviously precipitation would be outside of that. That being said, I think we're all watching maybe a meta metric group of which precipitation, overall maybe temperature, sea level rise, carbon concentration, some of these, we're hearing a number of you as well as others suggest that maybe there's a larger environmental scan dashboard, if you will, that tells us these things, because they then inform policy. They may not respond to policy, but they inform policy. So that has definitely come back to our team for discussion. And I think we're probably going to hear this from the community circles upcoming as well, that there's some of this sort of macro monitoring that we should be including in this, so we can track those patterns, because it informs your risk management decisions and investments as well. So thank you very much for the suggestion.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Laurie?
Oh, thanks. I sit on the air quality on that committee, and we don't sit very often. It is all different levels of government. And one of the air quality in Cowichan is very critical. That is something that we know and that has been monitored. And also what we can do about it. And one of them is the open burning. It's a bylaw that needs to be changed, but the air quality in Cowichan is
Sorry, Laura, you're fading out a little bit.
invasive species.
That's better, yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah.
I think that
You have to keep, I think you have to keep closer to your microphone, Laurie. Sorry. Yeah, sorry. Not sure what's up with that. Maybe, shall we move to Lynn and come back to you in a minute? Okay, Lynn, go ahead. Then close.
Thank you very much. This is a really interesting area, and I think that many of us are looking at it through lots of different levels. And one of the things I was wondering, does intertidal mean the same as marine, or is marine being put under that area? Or, because we have environmentally sensitive areas that are in the marine, and it's a different climate in the marine. If what you can grow actually in Saltaire may not be able to be grown out at Honeymoon Bay, just because of the marine environment, the salt in the air, some of the things that go on there. So I was just wondering if it's in here. I don't see it in here, and I'm not sure how we're tracking it. Thank you.
Okay, Mark?
Thank you, through the chair. Yes, so the sensitive species and sensitive areas classifications here are really mostly focused on terrestrial and terrestrial interface areas. So the marine environment, once we leave kind of the intertidal area, moves into a different, like really a marine area, which is largely under the controls of primarily the federal departments, DFO, and to a certain degree some of the provincial ones as well. So we did not go looking for actual marine metrics, marine health metrics. With respect to marine, we also separate here the saline, the saltwater environment versus the freshwater environment. So the ones that are up, in an area, as you noted, the saline environment, both in the air and the water, is quite different, and they're two different issues. So we sort of separate those. The intertidal is seen as one of those the highly sensitive, highly bioproductive environments at the interface with salt water and the land. So the numbers, the metrics that we can reliably get for you are organized that way. They don't wade out once we get out past the intertidal area at this point. If it is your wish to include more marine monitoring in this, it would certainly be appropriate to discuss that with that upcoming marine plan that Coralie mentioned. That would be an excellent time to dig into that kind of a metric to see if we could find some really useful metrics for you at that time.
Follow up?
Thank you. Just to follow up, I think that that's so important because a lot of the marine foreshore or the marine shorelines are extremely sensitive, not only environmentally, the soil, the stability, and what grows in that area is extremely important. People start changing up all the natural plants that are in that area, and then we start having different issues going on. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Laurie, would you like to try again?
Try again. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. I've never had that problem before. My was about invasive species, and some of them now are not exactly invasive. The blackberry was considered invasive, but actually it's a food source, and there's many animals that actually it's protection for them. So it's really complicated doing the invasive species. I don't know how we can that one, but I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I move to close, and then Allison.
just to follow up on what Lori said. I mean, I said once at a meeting, we humans are actually the most invasive species there are. And it's kind of a joke that we point at a little plant and say, "You're invasive, you got to go." And here we are destroying country after countryside or whatever. Anyway, that's a. I'd like to. I have a question. Can I get back to the general topic of the MOCP, or should we deal with this now? Because I apologize. I was distracted because I got an important phone call, and I noticed Ian was talking about, and I was going to get in there too. And can I talk about the general MOCP now, or?
I think that's okay. Yeah, we'll go with the flow. Yeah.
I would like to get back to my pet peeve, and that's equity. And I'm reading here across BC, our communities are experiencing growth, inequities, and so on. And it all sounds good. And it kind of, I guess it's the trend of the times now to bring that all in there and to show concern about equities. Or to me, we have no powers. This looks good on paper, but what are we actually going to do? Advantage groups or whatever in a community plan. There's nothing we can really do. We've got no tools. Are we going to put in a tool now and say, well, okay, we're going to have 10% of people with Spanish background, or 15% of blacks, or whatever? We can't do that. So we have no metrics. We have nothing to enforce anything there. To me, the whole thing is virtue signaling. That's all it is. Look at, we're doing something about that. Look, but in essence, in the end, we have no powers to do anything with that. And it kind of bugs me because we should have a plan that actually follow and actually enforce. There is nothing what we can enforce. It looks good. And yes, we're concerned about that, and we're doing some, but there's nothing, and so
okay,
anyway.
Close. Sorry, not to interrupt. Sorry, I didn't realize I thought you just meant back to this particular section on natural assets. So
no, okay.
Okay, so we'll swing back at the end, I think, when we can wrap up.
Okay, I'll have some more comments for later on. If you could keep that, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So next I had Allison and then Lori.
There was one more little policy thing that I thought was missing, was around supporting community water conservation ethos.
Okay, anyone want to take that? Not sure if that was a question, Allison, or.
No, I think it's a gap in the policy list of policies we've got.
Okay, noted then. Thank you. Next, Lori. No, who was it? Lori next? I forget who. Lost my.
I'll be later with Director Kuhn in the equity. I'd like to chat.
Okay, all right. Sounds good. All right. I'm just wondering now we're at 2:24. Why don't we take that's all the questions on the metrics from Mark. Let's take a 10-minute break and see everyone at 2:35.
Nothing seems to be happening here.
A little time warp. This is unusually long. Kathleen, any thoughts? Just waiting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are now live.
Okay, thank you. Welcome back, everyone. So I think we'll now turn to the next section. Patrick, please. Sorry, I can't hear you.
I'm just going to share my screen real quick.
There we go.
Right. So the next policy chapter is strengthen local food and agricultural systems. And before I dive into the policy chapter here, I do want to express gratitude and send thanks to Ione Smith, who is from Uplands Consulting, who helped us draft many of the policies in this particular chapter to make sure alignment with the ALC regulation, looking towards the future of agriculture in the country. So the challenges that relate to land conversion and land conflict. So, whether it's residential, industrial, or other types of uses that are, bumping up against agricultural lands, the availability of water as a resource to irrigate those lands, climate impacts, of course. The availability of labor and farm worker housing is a big one as well. As the rising cost of living and farming increase, the availability of that labor and farm worker housing is also something that is feeling a lot of pressure. And so the objectives here for this chapter is to really and enhance local security. And so the real big topics in this one are protecting those agricultural lands, but also including policies on food production. So just a set of sample policies here in terms of agricultural lands. We're wanting to obviously discourage exclusion of ALR land unless it's part of a wider community process that has engaged the public. So something like an OCP process that's led by the CVRD, or say a local area plan or neighborhood plan process. Those are processes through which we might identify lands that are that the community desires to see excluded from a agricultural land reserve, but ultimately I think that's something that we want to discourage. Encouraging agricultural land leasing and the accommodation of leases of agricultural land is also a really important one to make the agricultural sector more affordable and accessible to young farmers. So we're asking to collaborate with certain external organizations like the Young Agrarians to really identify those opportunities to increase agricultural opportunities and some of these opportunities on public lands as well. Educating neighbors about normal farm impacts such as odor, noise, traffic, and the Farm Practices Protection Right to Farm Act. And these conflicts that sometimes occur when you have residential development next to agricultural lands. Some folks may move in not knowing, there's farms that are being actively used and farmed right next door, and so these are things to be expected. Food production, so supporting the establishment of local food markets as key elements of the local food system, looking at opportunities to establish some of these food markets in some of the communities so folks have access to fresh local produce, and then in rural, suburban, and urban areas, really supporting and encouraging a range of urban agriculture using approaches that include things like the food production on private lands, whether those are backyard hens and beehives, for instance, food production on public lands that include edible landscapes, whether it's on residential boulevards, parklands, or backyards, and also investing into the development of new community gardens on public and private lands. So those are just examples of ways that we can encourage urban agriculture, encourage agriculture on lands that aren't necessarily for agricultural uses, but can help support that food security challenge. 2 metrics are associated with these, and I'll just pass it on to Mark.
Thank you, Patrick. Obviously, again, as the last topic, there is a lot of different metrics and information that we would love to track and monitor and speak to around the whole food system. We selected 2 here, again, under the same discussions of consistency and accuracy within CVRD boundaries, and really trying to get to really the core issues of your agricultural land base. So these are ALR inclusions and exclusions. So we can get this, you can get this data essentially almost instantaneously from the ALC. They update it pretty regularly. We're updated in this table to last year, to 2020 at the moment. And we're tracking inclusions and exclusions here from the ALR. Pleased to be able to notice that over the last 20 years, your amount of ALR land has actually gone up. There's been some land swaps and a few things, but you're actually 74 acres ahead of the game on that one. And the second piece is to look at what is actually happening on the agricultural land, in this case, the ALR land that you have, or the agricultural land that you have. This is really key. This is tracked by the province. There's a lot of agricultural data tracked by the province. We looked at a lot of it, and it didn't necessarily feed in specifically to your policies, but there is more there should you choose you want to really greatly enhance the dashboard's area of tracking what crops are grown over what period of time. They particularly are not necessarily informative to your official community plan. They may just be responsive to the market and food year by year, but there is other data. So we focus primarily just on exactly how is the agricultural land being used. You'll notice this, if you think for a moment, around the discussions that we see in the media around the Lower Mainland, where in 18,000 square foot homes with bedrooms, and then just kind of not doing much with the land, or just letting someone run hay on it. We wanted to, so then the land really is not very useful. So we wanted to track that as a core piece of your agricultural legacy and heritage and asset here. So this next one then looks at the land, the agricultural land that is in food and crop production. So the current information that you've got here, we've got 3 different years based on census data as to how, what percentage of it is being used in what ways. So what's good out of what you see here is that essentially pasture is not all that big a use, and really a good amount of your agricultural land is being used for crops, and it's staying pretty steady. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Thank you. So I will go to, I have a list, Ben, Mike, Lynn, and Ian, and just keep in mind, we will switch topics at 3 o'clock to make sure we get the other one done before Laurie and Allison have to leave. So we'll do that then. So Ben, go ahead, please.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the work done on this. I'm trying to understand some things like FA1 and FA10 seem to conflict with each other. And the reason I mention this is that the Agricultural Land Commission has non-farm use things that are applied on farms that are non-farm use, but are permitted by the ALC. And in FA1, it seems to recognize the authority and jurisdiction of the ALC for ALR lands, but this one seems to have other items in there that sort of takes away or impacts the authority. I'm wondering about how that sort of meshes with, one seems to conflict with the other. Any comment?
Through the chair to Director Martman, I think FA10 does, state where approved by the ALC. So as long as those uses, are consistent with local government, with your local government bylaws, and the ALC approves those uses to continue on those farms, it would be in compliance with the ALC Act. Ultimately, the ALC would be bound by their own Act. So does that, I'm not sure.
No, maybe I'll follow up. So one of the things that's happened in the last 2 years has been a relaxation by the ALC on doing non-farm events or non-farm practices, such as events, and most recently about having a second dwelling for other income. And those things are, I think, for most farms, any income that can be sought for is important. Most farms have to have some source of income that's not farm-based to help them survive. And these are two different places. So, for example, having an event, if these the OCP speaks to saying, well, you can have events, but only under these circumstances, and one of them being will not use productive agricultural lands. Well, quite frankly, they may have been mowed or hayed, and so, but it's the conflict that I see.
So through the chair to Director Martman, are you saying that the policy FA10 is perhaps a little too restrictive to certain types of events or activities that you would like to see on these farms?
I guess I'm just wondering how it meshes with FA1 when you say we'll recognize the authority, but at the same time, but then you go but. So the but is the thing that I wonder about how it, it may be important to have, but it contradicts your FA1 statement. So.
Okay, well, I think we can take a look at it and see if there's a way to make them, to bring a bit more clarity between those two policies. My interpretation of it is that if the LC is approving it, it's not going to be, against the authority or jurisdiction of the ALC. But yeah, we'll take a look to clarify that language. It's noted.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So I do have Mike, Lynn, Ian, and Allison on my list. If it's okay, I think I'll change the order. If I put Allison first, so that when you have to go, you'll have had a chance. So go ahead, please.
Thank you. Well, you caught me off guard there. I had a question on the measurements. Did we consider getting information from BC Assessment Authority on farm status and the number of the area that has farm status?
Through the chair, that's a great question. I have not actually looked into that question of farm status through the assessment, because that data should be pretty current and regularly updated. So we should be able to get that. We'll be very pleased to look at that.
Yeah, I think that would be really useful, especially if it could be GIS based, because then you could see how things are changing relative to water availability and so forth. And the other, just another small point on FA17, we don't have any control over whether farms have water storage or not. So it should be support the number of farms to get additional water storage options. And it seems to me that might be an important thing to track, although I don't know where you would get the measurements right now. But, the success of our agriculture is as much dependent on saving the land as having water for it, which is the point's made in the document. So we should have some measurement around that. Thanks.
Great, thank you. So Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Bryce. Yeah, Alison's actually made some very good points there as far as the water storage is concerned, because this is going to become more and more of a problem as time goes on. One of the things that came up there just now was the mention of community gardens, and this to me is pretty important, because a lot of you will not know about what happened in the UK during the war years. There were things called allotments, and basically they were small pocket-sized, room-sized areas where people could go and grow their own vegetables, and there were literally hundreds and hundreds of these things, and they became a social interchange as well. And the other thing about it is that they all talked to each other. All the expertise on growing this or that and that was held there and was passed on to a lot of people, and they were very, very productive. So I'm wondering if there's anything along those kind of things. And actually, with Ben being here, perhaps the farmers can look at putting aside an acre or two where you can actually say to people, come and make something here, do something with your 10 square meters or whatever. Has anything like that been looked at?
Through the chair to Director Wilson, I've not heard of that type of arrangement in the past, but it's certainly something that we can explore a little bit further if there have been arrangements or collaboration between certain farmers and communities. Though I expect that the ALC might have some strong regulations on whether that would constitute an appropriate use of those farmlands. Typically, we would try and see those types of community gardens on public lands or on lands that can be leased from a certain type of private land ownership outside of the ALC or ALR.
Okay, thank you. Lynn.
Thank you very much. Oh, one of the things that I think is very good is here FA 21, where it's talking about locating the buildings and the structures in close proximity, basically keeping the footprint of all the impervious areas close together to ensure that the rest of the land is used and usable. One of the things that I seem to notice is that someone will have a small acreage and then they want to build a second house on it, but they don't want it close to them. They want it to be in the very bottom section or as far away as possible. Yet then you have long driveways, you create a huge, more impervious area. And so I liked this, I thought was a really good statement here. One of the things I worry about is the smaller acreages. I'm not sure that having the second dwelling on those acreages, it just takes away so much from the productivity that could go on that land. And I'm wondering if there's some way that if something's under, I don't know, 10 acres, 5 acres, that there isn't that extra impervious area put on the land, because all of a sudden it takes away so much of the area that's useful, and then we're discouraging using of that land. So I'm wondering if that fits in here any place. Thank you.
So through the chair to Director Smith, so policy, I believe you're speaking to FA 22, which speaks to secondary dwellings within the ALR that might be considered in alignment with the ALC Act and the Agricultural Land Reserve Regulation, and any further conditions that the CVRD may choose through zoning regulations. And so through the modernized zoning bylaw, that is certainly a topic that can be explored to determine, size of lot whereby a secondary dwelling could be allowable. But that wouldn't be a topic that we would try and regulate through the OCP. And I believe Corley is.
Aaron Licker's online. He is Spatial's doing that analysis for us right now for all the electoral areas. We're actually looking at the lot size, and we'll be coming back with recommendations specifically. It'll relate more to the zoning bylaw, but it is being conducted.
Okay, thank you. I just have one more. Why don't we just do you, Ian, and then we'll switch.
At your peril, Mr. Chair, but sure, let's go for it.
Is it unless it's a thesis?
You might actually want to wait.
Okay, good. Let's do that so we don't lose people. So, Kathleen, if we could switch now to R2, please.
Strategic Initiatives Division regarding the chemicals consultation strategy and its for direction.
Thank you. So Coralie.
Thank you through the chair and to the directors. This staff report responds to direction to look at current one on the community circle and for in-person meetings. What this report outlines for you are three options. One is to continue as is with all virtual meetings till the end of May. The second one is to amend perhaps the final meetings at the end of May, which are currently scheduled for a second session. Staff is to, should wish to proceed with in person, but not at this time, is then to give direction to proceed with them in the fall or early in 2023. Those are the options presented. The costs anticipated, should they proceed at the end of May, are estimated at $60,000. And then staff has outlined concerns and notes so that effective April 8th, they are the requirements in events for proof of vaccination. So that does alter some of the logistics. And that's the overview of the staff report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So you're looking at three options here. So I have Sierra and then Klaus. And Ian.
Thanks. I did have the opportunity to speak with Corley before this meeting, and I can understand the logistics side of electronic for this topic of the boundary indications and that part of the land use. So, I support staff's recommendation for that. Moving forward, I think we really need to have a communication strategy based on, what kind of goals we want to have at the end, how much engagement we want to have at the end of it, and with more community focused, either events, getting in front of people at the coffee shop and the community circles and et cetera. And so at this time, I do support staff's recommendation to just have virtual.
Okay, thank you. Klaus?
Yes, I would like to move to option 3. And the reason I'm favoring option 3 is because I know that many of my residents would just not partake in a virtual session. They just won't do it. And I think if we go into virtual sessions, what we're doing actually is, now I'm getting back to equity. Now what we're doing is then kind of almost discriminate against the people that are not very fluent with computers. But they would speak up if they had an opportunity. But if we do it just virtually, I know we'll lose all these people. They'll say, oh no, I'm not going to get involved with that, and I don't know how to do it. And so I'm in favor of option 3, definitely. I'd rather do it all in person and do it properly and give everybody a chance to come rather than doing it kind of half. Because what you get, really, let's face it, when you limit it to people that are conversant with computers, you get the activist people that get involved because they're involved in everything and they're conversant with the computer and they will be there. And the people that also have an interest, they would have to add something, they're going to be left out because they're just not going to be on the computer. So for that reason, I move option 3.
Okay, move that. Is there a seconder? Okay, I see a seconder. Okay.
But can I just clarify? That's what I'm talking about. So kind of when I read it, it's just going to be option 3 is to have the virtual meetings at this point, and then to add in-person meetings later where it's appropriate for the topic. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so next I have Ian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with a number of things that have been said at this point. I think where I sit right now is that we only had one tool available to us when a lot of this was developed, and that was virtual. The universe has changed. We have every capacity to, every ability to meet in person with our communities. There's a yearning amongst people to not only discuss this material, but just about everything else under the sun, that only people that are of that sort of laptop class have been able to communicate effectively. So I'm really thinking that where we were 100% virtual even just a couple of months ago, I think we have to be nimble and we have to adapt. And I think that I would be more comfortable relying on in-person formats over the course of whether it's the summer and the fall or the spring and the fall. Yes, we should still use the virtual program that has been put together, but I just can't in good conscience proceed on such an important project like this without having that ability for that staff community interaction in a community hall with all the materials that go with it. And just as an example, I think the information session that was held on the recent Taylor Park for the community, I think from a lot of perspectives was effective in getting some messaging out, but was very unsatisfactory to a lot of the participants. And so I think now that we have the ability to go out and meet in person, bring the staff and all the material out, it's a lot more tactile. We're going to have a lot better buy-in for the approval of this project and the input that we might get if I'm almost looking at it as a 75% in person, 25% virtual. And I think this resolution will do it. And the cost is relatively high. I think it's a cost we can't afford to not spend. So I'll be supporting the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have Allison, then Ben, and then Lori. Did I miss anyone? Lynn? Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, Allison.
I am a little bit, from a financial point of view, what's the difference between 2 and 3?
Really?
Through the chair, it's basically the same cost. One is altering things so that there's in-person at the end of May, and the other one is doing in-person, additional in-person, either later this fall or in the winter. And we could probably do more for about the same amount of money, because there's a certain amount of planning and ad work that will be cost regardless.
Okay, so option 3 really slows down the process by another year, basically.
Option 3 would keep the momentum going, because the community, particularly the ones at the end of May, are based on the local area plan boundaries and input from the community on the boundaries. And this is part of an additional RFP that's gone out, that's in process, where we're looking at a report coming forward to the boards on the priorities for the local area plan development. We anticipate staff recommending additional community circles to then go into in-depth discussion on the local area plans and the agriculture plans, and particularly with respect to the modernized zoning bylaw. So it would be advancing the work and making sure that we had enough time to plan it in a different medium, because the current community circles have been planned based on a virtual platform.
Okay, and welcome, Mr. Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to add on to Director Morrison's comments in that I think the virtual format, while it's not perfect, and obviously staff, I think, would really relish in the opportunity going forward to meet with people on a personal level. We saw a great turnout for the events that we did have on this topic in all areas. More so than any since I've joined the organization. But I would also just like to say we have seen, even over the course of the pandemic, a great turnout for the virtual meetings. Our budget meetings are a good example where we had more people turn out virtually for our meetings than we did when we ran them the previous 2 years when we did them in person. And for small matters, you know, whether it's supposed to be a two-way conversation or whether it's just an information out type of situation and a question and answer period, like we had for the park project out in Shawnigan Lake, you know, we saw really great numbers of attendees. Obviously, I think technology always presents a problem for some people with joining, and we try to troubleshoot that as much as we can on the fly. But when we have 50 to 100 plus people turning out for some of our virtual meetings over the last couple of years, I would just say that they
Okay, thank you. Alice, follow up?
Yeah, I just would like some clarification just to really understand this. So for number one, this does not preclude volunteer facilitators from.
It does not, that's correct.
So
Does not preclude that.
Right, so it could be a combination of virtual and in-person.
It does not preclude self-organizing
Right.
community circles from meeting in person.
Option two would have CVRD do a few of them at the end of May. And option three will reorganize and do more in the fall or early or winter. And can I clarify that you think option three would be the best way forward at this point, or you sort of intimated that?
Well, thank you through the chair. Yeah, I've asked for a recommendation because the staff report does say poor direction. Staff would probably recommend number three. And I think it would be also based on what will be achieved by the in-person at those May meetings, which is extremely beneficial, having people meet in person. Totally agreed. But the purpose of those meetings, it'll be a second round on the neighborhood and local area plan boundaries. We have designed it virtually so that folks can grow or design on Collaboraboard, which is all is something that we've made friendly in terms of technology, and we're providing that as well for people to do at home. But to do the next set where we can actually meet in person and start digging in to those local area plans and planning, I think would be probably a better use of funds.
Okay, good. Thanks for clarifying. So now I have Ben.
Thank you, and you know, all very good points, and you know, I know for my area, I think I'm can speak that there's a fatigue around using anything that's technology based, and there's a real requirement to have a significant or a meaningful voice from this community is to meet them face to face, whether it's in May or whether it's in October. To me, the underlying pressure is the variant, and will COVID be back? Are we going to lose this opportunity by putting this off to the fall? And that's where we don't know. And I see an opportunity now, and I think that I would not want to be sitting here in September and going like, darn, that's when we should have done it, because now there's no opportunity to do it in person. So as much as I see three as being very positive and a way to move forward to get that voice, I also very concerned that we're still in uncharted waters. So I would be looking more to going with two and dealing with what we know.
Okay, thank you. So I have Lori, then Lynn, and then Sierra. Lori?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay? Otherwise, I could turn off my video too. I'm not sure. I'd just like to, first of all, make a comment on the Taylor Park meeting with the public. It was amazing and really well done by staff, and it explained everything. So that is another option. And I just had to put a plug in for equity, just for for people that are 8 to 80 to be able to participate. And I just wanted to throw that in for Director Kuhn. It's not necessarily the equity about race, color, or religion. It's about equity in many different ways. So it just depends how you want to break that down, but I had to throw that plug in before I left.
But you can't enforce it. You can't enforce it.
Okay, Klaus, hold on. Okay, we're going now to Lynn, please.
I think that we're winding up our communities and getting them excited about the community circles, all the policy that is being brought, that they can watch it twice, and that they can come to the CVRD community circles and they can have their own community circles. They're headed down a road. They've been waiting. And there was a total misunderstanding between a lot of people in regards to the HOCP, and lots of people were thinking that was the MOCP process, and so there was lots of confusion there. We finally are getting on track, and then all of a sudden we're going to put a big pause and say, well, let's wait till the fall. I'm not too sure whose door is going to get the most banging on, but I think it would be most of the directors. That you wind people, the people are excited, like they're engaging and they're thinking about this, and we're putting out posters and we're putting high energy into this. And I really that having in-person meetings at the end of May is a real positive push for the community. And that even if we have the meetings in May and then they've had those two options. They've had their possibility of doing virtual. They've had a possibility in person with each other. And they also have had the CVRD staff come, and then we can press pause and move into the fall. I really have a concern about how many times we've started and then they've been left behind trying to figure out where we are and where we're going. And I really would like to see some in-person meetings at the end of May. So I'm not sure if we can up our budget, like thousands into our communities payers money for this project, and maybe we could combine them both. Maybe Coralie has a thought on that, but I really want the in-person, and the sooner the better. So
Okay,
thank you.
Just for clarity, Lynn, so sounds like you're talking about option 2. Is that what you're asking for?
Well, I'm just asking,
Sure.
Can we up the budget and do the end of May in person? And because we feel confident that we won't be in COVID at the end of May. And if we're still not in COVID into October, we could continue in that process. But if
thank you.
Mr. Chairman, there is an option before us
right now. That's right. Yeah, we've got one on the floor, so I want to.
And just saying that I just can't support this one at this time. Thank you.
Okay, good. So I'll go to Director Atkin, hopefully to close, unless Coralie, did you want to comment on this one?
Yeah, I wish Coralie would comment. I don't want to put her on the spot, but I feel like some of the directors aren't actually the resolution states. If Coralie, for me, when you explained how, the stage that we're at and how we're in May just going to do those 4 meetings and to make those virtual, the breakdown a little bit, would you be able to explain that?
Yeah, sure. Happy to, through the chair. So to clarify where we're at right now, the ad campaign has started. And just as an aside, we've had 450 people already visit the site. We know the stats. So there's engagement there already. We have a strong campaign out. We're getting a good uptake on a lot of the other social media platforms. So we have started. The suggestion here on number 2 is to amend the planned virtual meetings for the end of May to in-person. The purpose of those specific meetings are on the local area plan boundaries. That's all that. At 4 meetings, we have secured those locations, invite people in, and we would replace the planned virtual meetings with in-person meetings, and been inviting the community to look at the boundaries for the new local area / neighborhood plans. That staff is also suggesting that additional community circle meetings could be planned and held in the fall or early winter. There's enough substantive work that merits having additional meetings. And staff is also suggesting that because we'll be further along with the zoning bylaw at that point in time, that there's a lot of work that the communities need to discuss. So we can, there probably be a better, could be if the use of money, the 60,000 is applied only once, 6 to 9 months. If Dr. Smith comment, if the budget was extended beyond that, we could do community circles at the end of May, and we could also do more in the fall.
Okay. Well, go ahead.
So that changes the topic a little bit, because that 60,000 that's mentioned in the report is only for the first 4 meetings in May, if we are to make them in person. So I think my community would prefer that we're responsible, fiscally responsible on this. Quite expensive because of the challenges of computers, etc., at the meeting, and that we'll be able to hold in-person meetings. We're not actually sure how the community is going to feel about coming together really that quick. So I'm going to support number 3, and thanks for your work on this, Corley.
Okay, very good. So we do have a recommendation on the floor, which is option 3. If there's no further questions, no further comments, I'd like to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? 3 opposed. Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. We will now turn back to, just before Allison and Lori go, we'll try to finish. I think, Ian, you were next on back to item 1.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I've got a couple of things here, and this is around what we measure and the likes. And so as important, I'm not diminishing the importance of ALR and the ALC, but you even described in your opening remarks, Mark, that over the past period of time, there's really not been a huge net loss or net gain, right? It's a fairly static thing to measure. So I'm more inclined to know more about the quality of what goes on there. And I know, because my area, and I call them the phony baloney exclusions, or the phony baloney 4 acres in for every 1 taken out, because invariably any land that comes out in an exchange is going to be that prime, productive, flat, close to communities kind of land. And what they're going to put in is going to be the rocky chunk of the side of a mountain somewhere that's out of public view and not very productive. So I'm more interested in measuring that kind of thing. Like, if there have been changes, what's the nature of the lands that have been exchanged, as opposed to knowing whether there's another 70 hectares or not over a 10-year period. So I'd like to bring that to your attention. And another question, and I'll stop after this one, I've got another couple items, but is in regards to what's being grown. Those of us that have been here more than a couple of terms know about a study that was done a while ago where we found that there's a huge amount of land that's in production for forage crops. understanding we've got a big dairy industry and it's important for that industry, but a lot of our land is in production to feed horses and not in production to feed people. So I'm not saying horses aren't important, don't want to get the equine people mad at me, but I think having a quality of what's being grown on the land is a really important measurement, as opposed to how many hectares and you know, plus or minus. So those are a couple of things, and if you could put me on the list to come back for my other two, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, Mark?
Yes, and thank you, and through the chair, and I'm sorry I need to leave in about 60 seconds here, or 75 seconds. The ALC is pretty tough right now. I guess my first comment would be, yes, the quality of ALR land in and out is a debate. In my experience, the ALC, and I don't generally get involved in ALR exclusions for just, you know, principal reasons, but they're pretty tough. They're pretty tough. They don't generally let an exchange of good land go for bad land. It may happen on occasion. It's a little different than the subdivision requirements, where developers will give you the worst 5% they can possibly find because they want the rest for development. So it's a little different than that. But I do agree. We'll look and see if we can find a sub measure of that talks about soil quality. We'll see if we can actually find some data on soil quality. And the second thing, really like your comment on crops. We'll go back into that data and see if we can find some additional metrics that we could add there that would further clarify, are we just basically growing crops for other animals and horses and other things? Because obviously the equestrian aspect of life is fabulous in a rural area. It also becomes complicated when we're talking about ALR land and food and the policies related to that. We will definitely look into those, because there's quite a dashboard of metrics on food that the province track, and we'll see if we can find you some additional ones for that. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm sorry, folks. I do need to leave to chair this next meeting. I apologize.
No worries. Thanks, Mark. That's great. And I think Allison and probably Laurie have to go too. Just FYI, I'm thinking after this talk, I think we'll stop for today and come back so that you'll be able to participate next time. Okay. All right. So now I'll go to Sierra, then Ben, and then back to Ian.
Well, since we're losing everyone, maybe the committee would indulge me in the fact where I'm probably looking to Coralie as to what I could do here. So I admittedly, I'm losing a little sleep here in Shawnigan Lake because, you know, we had the conversation of extending our boundaries, and we talked about that, and we kind of had some ideas around it, and it's kind of terrifying to me. Like, we did that same exercise 20 years ago and we still don't have sewer, and we tend to have we're having you know, some problematic development, or not even problematic development is not the right word, but we are not even developing in the areas that we want to develop in. So when we looked at the numbers of you know, the containment boundary versus the development happening outside, that kind of thing. So I'm losing sleep, and I'm wondering if we can have that conversation again and make sure that we really do the right thing for Shawnigan Lake. We could bring back the conversation of the boundaries and what that would mean and what the implications are and what the risks are by doing that would be really helpful.
Through the chair to Director Acton, I'll arrange a meeting with yourself and Patrick and Brian Dennison to look at suggested maps and do at a future, maybe even at the next special ESC meeting, but let's have that more in-depth conversation.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to Ben now, please.
Thanks. And I was just thinking about the metrics, so maybe the question will have to late, but Patrick, you may just weigh in.
Sorry, Ben, sorry, maybe turn your video off.
Okay.
Ben, sorry, if you could maybe turn your video off.
Okay, how about now? How's that?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, so this is around the metrics around agriculture, and knowing that, you know, they do rate the soils for farms and farmland. but I'm wondering if that is going to get monitored over climate change, and there's going to be a shift in those. I don't know if they will be doing that, but it certainly, I can see the quality and of lands changing over, you know, the next 10, 20, 30 years. And either we may get better. I really don't know, as an agricultural area.
And through the chair to Director Martman, that's a really good point, that the quality of soils, we kind of think of them typically as fairly static, but they definitely change over time. And especially with the climate crisis, there'll be certainly some parts that will get more water, some parts that will feel more drought. And so we can take a look to see if how often that type of metric can be calculated and maybe get back to you. So we'll leave that and his team, but we'll note it down. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go first to Mike and then back to Ian.
Yeah, and this goes to what I mentioned to Corley earlier on. Corley, is this the time to bring it up if we're going to be ending fairly soon and moving on to another time and date?
Through the chair, yes, you could bring it up now, Director Wilson, or we can, I think economies next time then, Patrick? It'll specifically be addressed next time, so either one is fine.
Okay, let's do it, and let's do it next time then, because that will give me more time to have a chat with you and perhaps Patrick as well before then.
Sure.
Good stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks, Mike, for yielding on that, because mine are still in this area. So two items, FA 19 and 29. You know, this is my view on OCPs is always they're aspirational documents, and yes, sometimes we venture into areas that we don't have jurisdiction, but I think in particular the discouraged subdivision of rural settlement areas and all land ALR to smaller parcels for residential use. Can't we come up with better wording than discouraged? Like, can it be strongly discouraged? I don't think we can prohibit, but I think the idea is farmland is for farmland and not for residential development. And within the scope of our powers, are we not sort of drawing a line in the sand and saying, like, we don't want that activity? And that also relates to the FA 29 as well. We don't want, like, the CVRD building stuff on agricultural lands, whether it be, or schools or churches, because agricultural lands are so darn important. So I'm discouraged just isn't a strong enough word in my mind, and when it comes to the limited production lands that we have available to us. And the last point, I'd like to hear what the staff and consultant. Aspirational concept, the notion of getting into this occupation, into this lifestyle. Made any mention of land lease programs or land bank programs, and maybe even a nod to farming succession planning. So I just in a quick scan, I haven't seen that, but are those, like, I think those are the kind of comments and aspirational ideas that we should have in a document like this. Thoughts?
Yeah, through the chair to Director Morrison, we can absolutely add a bit of stronger language on FA 19 and FA 29. I think they probably in October, those policies weren't even in the document, and so by virtue of them not existing, they didn't have any kind of statement related to them. But we can make it a bit stronger than just discouraging in the policy statement. As for encouraging young farmers and increasing access to farmland, there is FA6, which is around encouraging agricultural land leasing and the accommodation of leasees on agricultural land. Collaborate with external organizations like the Young Agrarians to identify opportunities to increase agricultural opportunities on public land. So there is a policy there. We could go back and see if there's other things, as you mentioned, in relation to succession plans as well, if that's desired. So.
Okay, thank you. So I have Ben and then Lynn. Ben?
Thanks, and through to Patrick. I just wanted to comment. I know Director Smith had made comments on FA21, and there's some practicalities around here that I don't know if are necessarily as apparent to non-farmers. But sorry about that. With, you know, where are your wells? Where are your ponds? Where are your other aspects that you require? Where are your fields? And so all of these things, I think, you know, really will change the nature of where you're going to locate your buildings. You know, we're not on sewer and water, and so it's going to change. We may have a very non-productive piece of property at the back of the parcel, and that's where the best place is going to be. So I'm also not sure you have the authority to put this in under locating buildings and structures, because I think it falls under the Agricultural Land Commission Act. So perhaps you can comment on that part.
Does eventually say to follow the home lines as per the Ministry of Agriculture, but this policy is probably more of a type of encouragement. Obviously, there's going to be various circumstances that might prevent certain buildings from being, you know, right next to each other or adjacent. There might be topographical issues. I think the essence is to try and keep as much of the agricultural land for farming purposes, but we can go back to our consultant Ione Smith and see if we can maybe massage the text a little bit and have something that is perhaps a little bit more considerate of not only the home plating guidelines, but also of particular circumstances that might be unique to certain farms.
And if I just follow up?
Follow up.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it right there, Patrick, in some of the language you just used. I think it's really about, you know, encouraging the best use of the land for farm practices in the location of buildings. And, you know, because I think that's what we all want is to have those farmlands used appropriately, but understanding that the farmer has to, you know, you can't, if your well is in one corner, you're not going to put your house in the part. So yeah, there's to that. Okay, thank you.
Just like to make an observation, having traveled in Europe, that in Europe there's a village and everybody lives in the village and they're home and they all are together and they hop on their tractor and away they go out to their farmland, and there is no house on the farmland. And I really think that that was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. We don't live like that. So we have to be a little more flexible. And looking at, you know, these documents, we're working really hard to preserve the farmland, which is what they did in Europe. So thank you.
All right. Okay, thank you. I think this is probably a good place to break. I'd just like to thank everyone. I think there's really good comments, and thank you, staff and consultants. I hope we have a good document at the end of all this. So Coralie, did you come up with a date for our next resumption?
Through the chair, staff would like to ask the directors if their preference would be to meet on a Wednesday morning before EASC. If that's a preference, then we could look at the availability for April 6th. No, that's not a good idea.
I think we have that, or Thursdays are also.
Or Thursday.
I think there's a EA director's thing that around then, if I'm not mistaken. In Richmond.
There's a LGLA, right? Okay. Yep. Okay, so that won't work.
So we can look at the next EASC date at 2 weeks from then on the Wednesday or a Thursday.
Yeah, either one works for me.
Patrick, are you available then?
What date was that, Coralie? Sorry.
The actual date would be, Patrick's giving me the thumbs up.
20th.
So we're looking at the 20th of April.
Yep.
I was slightly leaning toward the Thursday just for
21st?
Yeah, I'm just for fatigue purposes for chairing. It's a bit much to do both meetings. Yeah, if that works for others.
Patrick, are you available on the 21st? Okay, so I've got thumbs up from Patrick. 21st morning or afternoon?
What do people prefer?
I prefer afternoon.
Yeah, afternoon here as well.
Okay.
So 1:30 on the 21st.
Sounds good.
Okay. And there's additional policy areas, and then whatever other questions. So we'll schedule 3 hours, and if it's not needed, then that's fine too.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think, do we not have 3 additional policy areas?
Patrick, I think there's 2: economics and governance.
Yeah, so there's enhancing local prosperity as well as improving governance and implementation.
Oh, okay, because I show mitigate and adapt to the climate crisis as a number.
That was the first one that we completed.
Oh, it's changed. Okay. Interesting. Okay.
The ordering was changed actually in the OCP, just elevating it as
Right.
kind of in terms of the framework. So we'll send out.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I was just deferring to Director Morrison.
I was just going to, in the sense that I think there's going to be a fairly wrap-up discussion at the end of this section, so that would make sense. Thanks.
Sounds good. Lynn, you wanted to comment?
Well, I was just looking at the calendar and I see that we're starting going through it looks like the 4th or where is it? The 5th of April, we're starting the policy areas for that. I was just wondering if we could, if the meeting could be before we start into those areas. Because some of the topics are going to be before we've finished with these, so that is on the 9th, I think, and then we have enhanced regional. Anyhow, I'm just wondering, because we are going to be running through some of these with the communities, and we won't even have gone through them. Is it possible to be in March, or just so that we've finished with the topics before they go out to the community?
Possibly.
Patrick, are you available on March 30th? It's spring break for some folks, but it's.
Yep, I'm
Patrick's available on the 30th of March.
Yeah, that's the week where we don't normally have meetings. I don't know if people are around or not for that. It looks okay at the moment. Okay.
I think it's nice to have a week where you have nothing for a change.
Right.
Well, there's never nothing, but you know what I mean.
Thursday the 24th might also be a day that's open?
I think on the 24th, it would have to be in the morning because we have the 3-stream curbside workshop in the afternoon. But the 24th.
Let's have it in the morning.
Yeah.
Okay, Patrick, are you available on the, Patrick's saying thumbs up. He's available on the morning of the 24th.
He's very flexible. What time is the afternoon thing at, Lynn?
I think it's 1 to 3.
Okay, as long as
And are we all invited? It's not in my calendar.
Oh, we're not going to let Shawnigan have the 3rd stream.
All right. That's true. That's true.
We're all trying to figure out that 3rd stream, I think. So, yeah.
So 9:30 on the 24th is our latest option. That's a Thursday.
21st.
24th.
Okay.
24th.
4th. The only downside if we run out of time, oh well.
Well, 9:30 to what time did you say that started at, Lynn? 3:30?
Yeah, we'll be all right. We have to stop after 3 hours anyway.
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to meet that one because I'm just looking again at my diary. I'm going to be in Victoria at MFA. However, I shall arrange something with my alternate. Unless we can change it to another day. It's quite an important one, actually.
I'd prefer to find one where everybody can make
Yeah,
it.
I can't do the 24th.
Is
What
the
about the
17th too soon?
25th?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, what about the 25th?
That's a Friday.
I can do that.
9:30 a.m. 25th. Okay.
Okay.
We're assuming Lori and Allison will be okay.
I'll put a placeholder in your calendars
Okay.
without a WebEx meeting invite because I'll leave that to Angie. Okay, 25th, 9:30 to 12:30.
Perfect. Okay, we'll try for that.
So are we adjourning?
Just a point of clarification, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Is there a reason why we couldn't have it at 9, from 9 to 12?
No, that'd be fine, I think. Everybody okay with that? 9 o'clock? Yep, thumbs up all around. Okay, 9 o'clock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And could we get a recommendation that the meeting adjourn to reconvene on March 25th at 9 a.m.?
Okay, someone move that. Move, seconded. All in favor? Motion carries. Okay, I think that